Welcome to Customs and Courtesies, the show that brings military etiquette and the history behind our customs to you. I am your host, Sergeant First Class Wellington Stirrup. In today's episode, I will discuss with you the history behind beards, why we stopped allowing them, the misconceptions behind why we don't allow them, reasons why you will see some soldiers, like myself, who do have beards, and what countries allow some of their service members to have beards. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Now, I hope that this episode finds you all well. And this topic today is one that, in my opinion, is, well, it can be considered a topic that's very sensitive in nature. I've held many a conversation with guys who don't like the fact that women now get to have ponytails and nails painted and what have you in uniform, at least in the Army. I know in the Air Force, they've had these rules for quite some time. But I know there are a lot of guys out there that have issue with this because we have still yet to talk about beards in the military and why we can't have beards. And to those guys, I say, just be quiet. Like, seriously, just be quiet. Or hands in the pockets. Okay, cool, whatever. That kind of energy, in my opinion, is not conducive to a functioning work environment. So keep those kind of comments to yourself. Now, if you're curious on my position and standpoint on beards, well, I have a beard, and it's a pretty thick beard. You can see if you go to the Instagram page at Customs and Courtesies, you might catch a story where I'm giving you an update on what the week's episode is going to be, and you will notice I have a beard. I grow my beard out to the max length that I'm allowed at 1/4 of an inch. And I know other people, for religious reasons, who have beards, and I believe they're allowed to grow it out 2 inches. Now, if that offends you and that makes you upset because back in your day in the military, you weren't allowed to have beards, again, just please stop talking. It's not helpful. It's not conducive. And honestly, nobody really cares for those of us that have our beards. I see a lot of comments online when you hear about Sikhs that get to finally wear their beards or their turbans, and people really get bent out of shape over it. And I'm here to tell you this. In the military, in the U.S. military, that is, if you have a religious or a medical reason to have a beard, guess what? You can have a beard. It's not a racial thing. It's simply a medical condition or a religious condition. I have known white guys who have had beards, not for religious reasons, but for medical reasons, because they get razor bumps. I'm not going to use the medical term because I cannot pronounce it properly and I will butcher it. Fasciculitis, I think, is what it's called. But either way, I have seen white guys with beards. So if you're going to get bent out of shape for somebody having a religious reason or a medical reason, just stop, okay? So, on that note, let's get started with this episode. Now, I will say this, from my research that I have found and from people that I have talked to, at least in the U.S. military, all the way up until the 80s, beards were allowed in certain branches of the military. For instance, the Coast Guard, they stopped allowing beards in 1986. They were allowed to have beards up until 1986. And then the Navy, they were allowed to have beards up until the 70s. And they kind of did away with that. Now, the Army is a bit different. And same with the Marine Corps. in the Air Force. But nowadays, most people, for religious and medical reasons, they're allowed to have beards. And I know people who have beards for religious reasons, and I think it's quite cool that now we're starting to, allow that. Even if you don't necessarily agree with their religious ideology, hey, it's in their religion, they're allowed. Pagan, Sikh, Muslim, it doesn't matter. If they're allowed by their religious beliefs, they're allowed. And I would actually go to argue that even if you're a Christian, you could make the argument that you should be allowed to have a beard because it's written all throughout the Bible, the rules on grooming. Just go look up Samson. Anyways, let's get on to some of the stuff that I've come across. So, as I highlighted earlier, the Navy, up until the 70s, right, they allowed beards. And I'm going to read this that I found right here. It says, on November 10th, 1970, the Chief of Naval Operations, Elmo Zumwalt, explicitly authorized beards for active duty naval personnel in his Z-gram number 57. Quote, elimination of demeaning or abrasive regulation, end quote. Although his position was that they were already implicitly allowed based on policy changes made by his predecessor, Thomas H. Moore. It goes on to say, 1. Those demeaning or abrasive regulations, generally referred to in the fleet as Mickey Mouse or chicken regs, have, in my judgment, done almost as much to cause dissatisfaction among our personnel as have extended family separation and low pay scales. I desire to eliminate many of the most abrasive policies, standardize others which are inconsistently enforced, and provide some general guidance which reflects my conviction that if we are to place the importance and the responsibility of the quote person end quote in proper perspective, in the mere or more efficient Navy we are seeking, the worth and personal dignity of the individual must be forcefully reaffirmed. The policy changes below are effective immediately and will be amplified by more detailed implementing directives to be issued separately. It goes on to number 2, where he states, it appears that my predecessor's guidance in May on the subject of haircuts, beards, and sideburns is insufficiently understood, and for this reason I want to restate what I believe to be explicit. In the case of haircuts, sideburns, and contemporary clothing styles, my view is that we must learn to adapt to changing fashions. Ooh, I think I talked about that on my first episode about how we should, every now and then, revamp some of the customs. Interesting. He goes on to say, I will not countenance the rights or privileges of any officers or enlisted men being abrogated in any way because they chose to grow sideburns or neatly trimmed beards or mustaches. I know some people in the infantry that really despise mustaches. They say it's only for tankers to have. Oh well. Or because preferences in neat clothing styles are at variance with the taste of their seniors. Nor will I countenance any personal being in any way penalized during the time they are growing beards, mustaches, or sideburns. And that is where he ended that. And I find this interesting because when I was stationed at JBLM, or Joint Base Lewis McChord, in Tacoma, Washington, I had a battalion commander who I will not name, but he used to always get on one of the guys that I worked with. His name was Dyer, because Dyer, good old Nate, had sideburns. Now, his sideburns were within accordance with the regulation of length and appearance, but the battalion commander did not like the fact that this specialist walking around had sideburns. And every now and then he would make a comment. Hey, Specialist Dyer, do you think that those sideburns are professional in nature? Do you think that that sets off a professional image? And Dyer would just always respond with, well, sir, respectfully, my sideburns are within regulation. So, yes, they do set off a professional image. And I do have them in accordance with regulations. So they are professional in nature. In which the BC would then respond with, well, would you trust a doctor or a lawyer who has sideburns or facial hair? Do they set off a professional image? And his response was, well, sir, they went to either law school or medical school and are now a doctor or a lawyer. So, yes, I would trust their professional judgment because they went to school for that. Their facial appearance or their facial hair and their appearance does not dictate my level of trust in them because they've already demonstrated that they can do the job. And if they can't, I don't think it's because of sideburns or facial hair of any nature. Now, the battalion commander didn't really like that too much. And, he would obviously talk to the battalion sergeant major, who would then talk to, the company commander and then the company first sergeant. And Dyer would always kind of get yelled at. But there was nothing that they could do because Dyer was in the right. He was following the regulation. His sideburns were not wrong. And when the first sergeant would pull him into the office with his squad leader and platoon sergeant, and they would look at his sideburns, the first sergeant would be like, why are we wasting our time with this? His sideburns are within regs. Meanwhile, you will catch people trying to police people up on their mustaches because their mustaches is out of regs. Or if you want to quote Generation Kill from HBO, your mustache is out of regs. Yeah, okay. I'm going to stop with that. Anyways, moving on. Let's talk about that, the appearance, because if you listen to last week's episode with Master Sergeant Andy, he kind of hit on that briefly. He said that the people who tend to take the most grievance with people having beards are the people that can't even grow a beard. And I am inclined to agree because I have seen people who can grow beards, and while on leave, we have held competitions who can grow the best looking beard in a month. And you tend to notice that, you get a lot of compliments on a nice looking beard. And then the people that can't grow beards, they kind of get a little salty. Now, as I've mentioned, I have a beard and I grow my beard out to the max length that I am allowed. And I make sure that it is trimmed, neat in appearance, and I go on with my business. And you know what? I have actually gotten comments from people, but not the type of comments you're probably thinking. No, I have held conversations with my brigade sergeant major here at 4 SFAB in the past where he has seen me over at brigade staff duty walking by and he just goes, wow, that is a nice beard, man. Keep it up. And in which I just respond, thank you very much, Sergeant Major. It just grows in full. So, I am proud of my beard. I know that there are people out there that don't like the fact that I rock a beard. And you know what? Hey, I'm within my right to because I have medical reasons for it and I stay within the regulation of it. Now, if I wanted to push for a religious exemption, I could. And in which I could grow my beard out 2 more inches. Because that is what is allowed for the religious exemption is 2 inches of length, I believe. And if any of my listeners who do have it for religious reasons know any more, please get in the comments and let me know. All right. But here's something that I also thought was interesting on the topic of beards, because the Air Force recently just updated some of their policies and they highlighted beards. Now, there's a video that's kind of gone viral recently on an Air Force E7 who is doing a pro mask test, and his pro mask seals. Gasp. Surprise, surprise. It seals. Now, as a person who has done gas chamber tests recently within the past 6 years while still having a beard, I can tell you this because the comments in the video that this guy posted, and oh, by the way, he's a white guy. Not that race actually even matters, but I just wanted to highlight that he's a white guy. He's rocking a beard, and it's a pretty full, thick beard. Now, the comments in his video and people who took that video and then, made reactions to it. Like if you go over to Lord of Lips over on Instagram, he did a reaction to it. If you go to, I think it's Keegan Dunlap, he's a Marine, he did a reaction to it. And they're all like, wait a minute, what? You mean to tell me that it seals? And I'm in the comments like, I've had a beard now for, I don't know, since 2016. I've been rocking a beard consistently. And I've done CBRN training since then. Obviously, we do it when you come into the military. I've done it since. I know most people have only done it once and only once, but I've done it multiple times. And I even did it just to prove that my mask would seal with the old masks and our new ones. And the new ones are even better. And guess what? It seals. Okay, so I'm going to put that to rest right now. Mine seals for me. The Air Force guy, it's sealed for him. Now, let me just pause right there while I pull something up real quick because my friend sent this to me and said that I could use it for the show because he found it on U.S. Army WTF moments. So, I screenshotted this and I'm going to read this off. It goes, great. This is a post from U.S. Army WTF. And they said, great training. Don't know about that beard test, though. We may need to grow beards across the force for a better sample. Shout out to the 416th Theater Engineer Command. Now, they reposted their post, and their post went like this. 372nd sends bluff. Beards don't seal. Keep shaving. Updated 21 March. Everyone has heard that soldiers can't have beards because the mask won't seal. Well, our HHC did a Mythbusters CBRN gas mask event to test it out. A few volunteers signed up to grow a beard over the past few months to see if they can get a seal and how long they would last. And well, they didn't. Update, 372nd Engineer Brigade. We are the unit that did the test per brigade commander authorization. To clear some questions, where's it at? Hold on. Lost my train of thought. We see here. 1. Any volunteer of any rank was authorized to grow a beard. They could start as early as December for this test in March. They kept the beards for the remainder of the weekend, but now back to grooming standards. 2. Soldiers of all ranks participated E1 on up and were very enthusiastic about it. 3. Some soldiers started growing their beards or had to shave between the period. So we had about 4 test groups of varying lengths from clean shaved to exceeding Army beard lengths. Notice that one right there. Exceeding Army beard lengths. They go on to number 4 where they say some masks did seal, but many did not. The point of the mask standard is that it protects the entire force, not the few that can get a seal. Number 5, we leave it to Big Army to reevaluate the policy we have, or the mask we have, whether the policy should only apply in CBRN threat environments or considering it as a reenlistment bonus. And then they go on to say, thank you all for sharing your thoughts. Hashtag Essayons, hashtag ELTW, hashtag Combat Engineers. Now, I will go on the record as saying that, yes, for me, my mask seals. For that Air Force E7, his mask seals. For a couple other people out there, their mask does seal too. But I understand that the mask won't seal for everybody. And I am also of the belief that If you are in a CBRN environment and you need to shave, then yes, shave. It's a safety risk. I'm not going to say that we should be able to keep our beards at all times, but also at the same time, how often are we going to be in a CBRN environment? Maybe at the beginning of a war, like when we went into Iraq, they were at MOP levels there. And sure, fine. But in garrison, I doubt that you're going to see CBRN. So, with that being said, I feel like in a garrison environment or in a combat environment, or let me back up, in a garrison environment and on a employment, not a combat, but an employment environment. So doing a rotation out to Korea or a rotation out to Europe or Africa, grow a beard. Let people grow a beard. If it's a combat environment where you fear the threat of CBRN, then yes, all of us with beards will fully be understanding and say, yeah, probably should shave today. But how often is that going to happen? Not very often. Now, moving on to the next thing, the history behind it. You see, a lot of people have the misconception of the beards and your pro mask or gas mask because of, World War One. Now, here's the thing. In World War One, originally, the gas masks were not the ones that we have today. Obviously, technology changes, but they weren't the ones that were sealed to a face. Originally, they were kind of like, think of putting a bag over your head, right? So that is kind of what they were rocking in the early stages of the war. What you see is soldiers starting to shave their beards and mustaches and hair because of the war. And it's not because of gas. No, it's because of lice, right? It is a hygiene thing, not because of the gas mask. So when people say, oh, we can't have beards because of gas masks, or, you shouldn't be able to have a beard because of a CBRN environment. Cool, I'll shave my beard. But in reality, when you sit there and say those things, you're actually being misquoted. That's wrong. And it's not because of gas masks or CBRN environment. No, it is because of cleanliness, hygiene. You see, a lot of soldiers were in close quarters with one another during World War One. Obviously, the conditions in the trenches were horrific. I mean, you can look on what's going on right now with the war in Ukraine. And we're back to trench warfare over there. And if you look at some of the pictures that are on social media of those trenches, it's not much better than what they were dealing with in World War One. And I guarantee that for the most part, up until the war in Ukraine, we did not think that trench warfare would be back in Europe. Yet here we are. Topic for another day. A history of trench warfare. I think we should go into that. Because it wasn't World War One where trench warfare broke out, by the way. It was actually a civil war here in the U.S. Anywho, let me get back on track. You see, if you go back and you look, as I mentioned, we were in close quarters with one another during World War One, and that allowed for what to happen? Disease. Disease spreads during combat of any war. And usually up until modern war, and I'll say modern war in the context of the Gulf War forward. So, early 90s till now. You know what? Let me even just say the 80s until now. Because even in Vietnam, you had a lot of people dying, not necessarily from combat, but from disease, right? That is usually, throughout history, what kills soldiers the most? Disease. Whether it's wounds that are disease, sickness suffered from their wounds, being in close quarters with one another, um, you know, getting illnesses that are relatable to the area that they're operating in, like think malaria and stuff like that, yellow fever, all of those things, gangrene, right? Sickness just tends to kill soldiers more than actual combat. So when you look at it, that is why, that is where the tradition, right? The custom, right? The custom, because the traditions are customs, so customs are traditions. So that is where the custom or the tradition of grooming standards in the military often reflect from historical practices and traditions for many years. Clean shaven faces were the norm in military units. And these standards, they've just persisted in many organizations. And because of that, people have a sense, again, it wasn't until the 70s and 80s that beards were starting to die off here in America, or the United States, I should say. And so at that point, you start seeing it turn into a custom, and then civilian population starts looking at it and as a sense of professionalism. And so some would argue that a clean shaven appearance projects professionalism, like that battalion commander I was talking to you about, and discipline, which, they're valued traits in the military, especially within the organizations. And while this perception may vary culturally, right? So that's another custom thing right there. Culture is a custom. So while this perception may vary culturally, many militaries prioritize a neat and tidy appearance among their personnel. But it all stemmed back to safety and hygiene. So the safety aspect is the CBRN aspect, right? Protective gear, endangering personnel, and all that type of stuff. We discussed that. But the hygiene aspect is where those other three things kind of stemmed from. The maintaining of good hygiene is crucial in the military, especially in close quarters. Now, I am a stickler. I have seen people out in the field go through the chow line to get their food, and they start eating their food with their gloves that they've been wearing and operating in all day long, all night long, crawling through the dirt, messing with their weapons, messing with vehicles. And to me, that is just repulsive. I'm going to say it how it is. I find it repulsive because think about the amount of chemicals. And this disgusted me pretty much since I came in the military in 2010. So this is before we knew about microplastics and forever chemicals and all the, the little buzzwords going on around. And all I could think of is you're literally eating dirt, motor oil, gasoline, not even gasoline, JP8, right? JP8. So dirt, oil, JP8, weapons, CLP, grease from your weapon. You name it. Right? You went to the porta potty with those gloves on, man, and now you're over here eating your food. And guess what? Now you're sick. Now we're down a person. And now we're supposed to go out and conduct this exercise. Or now we're supposed to go out and conduct a patrol. And now we don't have our radio operator or our minehound operator or our machine gunner or our saw gunner. You name it. Our Raven operator, our medic. I doubt the medic, but you never know, right? Or our forward observer. It doesn't matter, right? Like it's people who have poor hygiene are a risk to the force, because not only are you going to potentially get yourself sick, but you're going to get your friends sick too. And now we all have dysentery, which is what happened to the platoon that I was in with when we were in Afghanistan, my first time around. We all wound up getting dysentery, and we were out for about a week and a half, 2 weeks. Sick. I'm not going to get into the details on that one. And I'm not going to say it's because anybody got us sick. I think it was just the conditions that we were forced to be in. But, our platoon sergeant, Sergeant Kent at the time, he's retired first sergeant, but, he was big on cleanliness. And our platoon was actually really good when it came to cleanliness, and we just all wound up getting sick with dysentery. So I'm not saying that it was because we had some dirty birds, as they're called in our platoon, but I will just say that it was the conditions that we were stuck living in. And that was by accident. Now imagine the scenario that I'm talking to you about with the kid eating with his gloves on. That's not by accident. That's on purpose. He's wearing them still while he's eating. That's just poor hygiene, right? And so going all the way back to World War One, where you start seeing beards and the handlebar mustaches and the mutton chops all starting to disappear, it's because of hygiene. Shaved heads. We all know that in the military, once you go through basic training, what did they do? Sat me down in a barber's chair, spun me around, now I have no hair. Yeah, it's because of lice, right? It's because of lice and bloodborne illnesses and other things like that. So when you think of hygiene, it's maintaining good hygiene. It's crucial in a military setting. Like I said, in close quarters or prolonged deployments. So beards, they can harbor bacteria and other pathogens if not properly cleaned and groomed, and increasing the risk of skin infections or health issues. Now, I have heard some people that I know, they also will bring up the fact that, hey, shaving out in the field is actually a health risk. And I've heard this from medics. Shaving while you're out in the field, that's a health risk because what happens when you shave? You can cut your face. Now you have an open sore on your face. So it's kind of a double-edged sword, right? But I do know some people that need to wash their beards out, right? I like to take care of my beard. It's a routine for me. It's a process. I like it. It's therapeutic. But I do know people that don't take care of their beards, and I'm like, that's gross. You should shave. And I'm not talking about people in the military, just seeing, people out and about when I see them. I did see a guy the other day when I was with my family and we were driving in the car. He pulls up next to us, and all I could think was, wow, that is a nice beard. And meanwhile, my son in the back goes, I like his car more. Yeah. So, to each their own, kid. I mean, it was a WRX, so I mean, I do like those. But yeah, getting back on topic. So was it World War One that made it so beards are no longer allowed in the military? No. The prohibition of beards in the military is not solely attributed to World War One, but the war did play a role in shaping grooming standards during the time. During World War One, there were practical reasons for soldiers to maintain clean-shaven faces, like I've mentioned. But at the same time, the emphasis on hygiene and uniformity in the military setting also contributed to the adoption of the grooming standards in facial hair. However, it's important to note that standards have evolved over time and can vary between different military organizations. Now, I have friends who are in the Canadian military, the New Zealand military, the Australian military, the British military, German military. I've worked with a host of various different NATO partners and Five Eye partners. And I've seen some who have beards and I've seen some who don't. One of the people that I worked with in the German military told me that for them, if you have a beard, or they're allowed to grow a beard, if you come into the military with a beard, right? And you're allowed to grow it back out to a certain length. Now, this is what they told me. I haven't necessarily confirmed that, but I will take that in good faith. Some of the Canadians that I know, they have beards, and some of the Kiwis that I know, they had beards too. Now, the Kiwi that I'm good friends with, my buddy Mark, I do plan on bringing him on. He was in the Navy, so it could be different, right? Navy do have different customs across the board. And when I say across the board, I mean across from different countries to, country to country to country. I know that when you're out at sea, sometimes they have relaxed grooming standards and they grow a beard because they're out at sea. So they're not at the flagpole. They're not seen. So it's kind of like, it's okay. But when I bring him on, maybe we can talk about Beards 2.0 and why he was able to have a beard and, their practices over in that military. So, people can have beards in militaries. Now, I do know that for, the Five Eye countries, so that's the United States, Canada, New Zealand, Australia, and the UK, they all tend to have the same standing when it comes to medical and religious acceptance for beards. Some of the countries have relaxed some of the standards and are allowing their force now to grow beards in certain settings. And I think that's great. I really do. I do understand where the resentment, because women in the United States Army are now allowed to have ponytails and stuff like that. I can understand some of that, but at the same time, it's the way that these guys are coming off that is upsetting. And again, I would just say go talk to a doctor and see if you can get a medical exemption for it, or talk to your chaplain and see if you can get it for religious reasons. It's not hard. It's really not that hard. So don't resent the women for writing a white paper and eloquently presenting it to the board in a manner of professionalism of why medically it's better for women to have their hair in a ponytail, right? Rather than in a bun, pulling it back. And now we're talking about damaging hair. And let's not get started on the standards that we hold genders to, the beauty standards that we hold them to, because, let's not just go down that rabbit hole. Anyways, so when I hear these guys complain about beards, that's just my thing. Like, okay, well, go talk to your PA, see if it's a medical thing that you can get, or go talk to the chaplain because you claim to be a pagan anyway. So go on, homie, do your thing. Grow your beard out for, your beliefs. Or if you're a Christian, hey, you have a Bible. It is written. It is there. The evidence is there for you to make a sound argument. Now, the question is, can you make that sound argument? That's a different topic for another day. But I've given you your path. So go forth and conquer and try to grow your beard. Now, some people will use the excuse of, well, firefighters are allowed to have beards. And I like this one because firefighters, in the most part, some are allowed to have beards. And again, it could be from variation from country to country, or fire department to fire department. But as I've come across and learned, they still have to make sure that they abide by certain specific guidelines to ensure a proper fit of their protective equipment. So, while they may have beards, they have to adhere to those guidelines. Now, what does that mean for us in the military? It means that you have a ground to stand on here. You can use firefighters as an example because you can say that the SCBA design or the modern SCBA equipment used by firefighters often includes a mask that can accommodate various facial features, including beards. So while still providing an effective seal, these masks are designed to form a tight seal against the face, even with facial hair present. Now, our new masks, they can work with facial hair. But again, let's just go back to it on the easiest way to present this to the military on why we should be able to have beards. We should be able to have beards if we're in a garrison environment. We're not at risk of sea burn. So if we're not at risk of sea burn, why can't we have beards? And if you're going to say it's because of professionalism, I dare say, look back at the old pictures of our generals, right? Go back to the Civil War. Go back to the Revolutionary War. Go back to the War of 1812. Go back to World War I. I'm all out of whack with the dates right now, so I'm just naming them off the top of my head. And even better yet, you want to talk about professionalism? In certain operational environments, are Green Berets allowed to have beards? We've sure seen the pictures. In certain environments, I know that when I was deployed my second time to Afghanistan, I was given a relaxed grooming standard because I work in military intelligence. And so the team that I was with, we all had beards. Nobody ever questioned us on our level of professionalism. There are lawyers out there who have beards. There are judges out there who have beards. There are doctors who have facial hair. Nobody's questioning their professionalism. So when it comes down to the question of professionalism, I would say that we should be able to have beards if we're in a garrison environment. Now, if we're in a combat zone, a combat environment where the risk of CBRN attack is real, I would say then you just put out the policy that, hey, it's a thing that could happen. We need to be safe, and I guarantee you everybody will be on board. And that's all the military has to do. I'm not going to say the army, but that's all the military has to do. Because a nicely trimmed or hold on, the thought literally just hit me. Wear an appearance of your uniform, right? So for the Army, that's AR 670-1. I don't know what it is for the other branches of the military or, our allied partners, but for our regulation in the Army, 670-1, clean, neat in appearance, right? Your haircut. You have to have a haircut that's clean, neat in appearance, not fattish. Now, that is subjective because that's up to the commander to determine. However, I would say this, when it comes to beards, allow your soldiers to grow beards. And then, if you deem as the commander or the first sergeant or a person who is delegated with the authority, and you see a soldier and their beard does not look well kept, hey soldier, come here real quick. Let me talk to you. That beard, your beard, it doesn't look like it's being well kept. It doesn't look like you're maintaining it very well. I'm going to need you to go shave. Or at least trim it. Right? Trim it down. Get the crumbs from your breakfast out of there. It's lunchtime now. Right? I joke, but that's all you have to do. That's all you have to do. Allow us to have the beards, and then when you see how people can grow their beards, if you see the person whose beard is patchy, hey brother, nah, that's just not going to work. You need to keep shaving. It will look better, trust me. Hey soldier, that beard looks unkempt. You need to either trim it or shave it. There you go. It's that easy. It's literally that easy, and I feel like I just solved the issue right there. Allow us to have the beards in the garrison setting. If we're in a combat zone, oh, by the way, we're not, right? Not at the current moment, but if you're in a combat zone and the threat of CBRN is possible, shave. Other than that, I think that we should be allowed to have beards. Police up the people who can't grow them. Police up the people who don't maintain them in any proper appearance. And there you go. Now you're upholding a standard. Now it's professional, right? You don't want any raggedy people running around representing your organization, right? So make sure it's neat and trimmed. If you're in a unit that does a motor pool formation every Monday where you get in your in-ranks inspection, that's when you go around and you look to see who has their dog tags, their CAC, their fresh haircut, clean boots, clean uniform, even though for some reason you're in the motor pool and about to do maintenance on a vehicle. Why does your uniform have to be clean if you're about to do maintenance on a vehicle? I still don't understand that one. But it's a custom, and it's a custom that should probably change, right? You should do your in-ranks inspections, or as I'm going to start calling it now, inspanks. No, you should do your in-ranks inspections somewhere else at a different time. And then that's when you go around while you're also looking at people's haircuts and you're looking at soldiers' beards. Very nice beard you have there, soldier. I like it. Oh, are you still in the beginning phases of growing out that beard? Because it's patchy. Oh no, it's been a month? Ooh. And you'll know because if you're doing this every Monday, you'll be like, last Monday it looked the same. Brother, you need to shave. Ooh. Did you wash your face after PT this morning because your beard has food in it or it just looks bad or whatever, right? You're getting the gist of what I'm putting down. When you conduct those in-ranks inspections, your inspections, I'm literally going to run with this until I decide not to. But when you're doing your in-ranks inspection, that's the time where you make your critiques on soldiers' haircuts, on their wear and appearance of their uniform. And if we were to just allow the beards, that's where you would make your critiques on soldiers' beards. And then they have by the end of the day to rectify the situation. It's not hard. So I feel like the Army at least. I'm not going to speak for the other branches, but I feel like the Army should at least take that into consideration. And then we don't have to listen to the guys gripe and moan about, why do women get to do this? Why do women get to have that? Oh, look, now you have your beards, And recently there was a Military Times article that was written about the changes that the Air Force had made. And in that article, they noted how there's about 60% of the black airmen out there who suffer from having the same condition that I have, fasciculitis and razor bumps. And, some of them fear repercussion from their chain of command because they have to have beards. And I know that for my first 4 years, I did. I felt like, I couldn't have a beard. I couldn't go get a shaving profile because I would get looked down upon. And what was actually kind of funny about it was my team leaders who would sit there and be like, why don't you have a shaving profile? And I, for whatever reason, I was like, I don't know how to go about it, or I don't feel comfortable trying to get one. And one of them actually was like, you should just not shave and see what happens. And sure enough, there was like a month where I didn't shave. And nobody ever even batted an eye because they just assumed, well, he's black, so he has a shaving profile. But that was when I decided, you know what? I went back to him. I was like, I took your advice and, nobody's even saying anything. He's like, see? He's like, now go shave. And, let's do it the right way. And so I was like, I did. And he walked me over to the aid station and then I got a shaving profile. And that was easy. That was it, So we don't need to fear repercussion. Especially if you have good leadership. You don't need to fear repercussion. If you have bad leadership, that's when you fear that repercussion. And if you have bad leadership who's giving you a hard time because you have a beard or because you have to have a shaving profile, then you should take that up with the powers that be because that's not right. It's not right. And it's usually going to be the same guys who are like, well, why can we have beards? Well, now you have your beards. I've laid out the details. Now you have your beards. So, yeah. You have your beards. Stop your complaining. And on that note, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, I am going to sign off. And I am going to leave you with this. A man without a mustache is like a cup of tea without sugar. Anonymous. Life is like a mustache. It can be wonderful and terrible, but it always tickles. Nora Roberts. The scruffier your beard, the sharper you need to dress. Ashton Kutcher. And the last one, grow with care, wear with pride. Anonymous. And that's the one that I think I like the most. Grow with care, wear with pride. Because every time you put on a uniform, you're supposed to wear a uniform with pride, right? So if you're growing out a beard, you should grow it with pride. Reeks of confidence. Anyways, good day, good night, good afternoon, wherever you are, good morning. And I hope you all enjoyed this episode. Sergeant First Class Stirrup, signing off.